Welcome to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast for club owners, operators, and fitness professionals. Each week, host Bryan O'Rourke brings you an expert interview with a global influencer at the crossroads of fitness and technology. You gain the insights, tools, and inspiration you need to stay connected to the pulse for what matters most for your business in the age of exponential technologies.
Hello, listeners. Bryan O'Rourke here. Happy summer as we're in May now when we recorded this interview. I hope you're having a great spring thus far as summer approaches. And I'm so glad you're joining us today because we have a great guest, Craig Miller, who's the Chief Digital Officer for Planet Fitness, which, as I'll mention in the interview, is the largest health club chain now in the world, serving 13 million members with about 1,800 locations. Craig has been in the industry space now for a little over a year and a half, and he comes to Planet from Sonic Drive-Ins and has a breadth of experience in the movie business, in banking, in consumer products, and a background in computer engineering and business and systems engineering. Had the opportunity to spend some time with him at IHRSA, and he recently joined the Fitness Industry Technology Council. We've had a few chats, and I think there are a lot of things that he'll share details on that you're going to find very interesting. And so without further ado, let's join Craig and I. Hello, listeners. As I mentioned in the intro, we had a super guest for today's podcast, Craig Miller, and I told you a little bit about his background prior to him joining our call. Craig, how are you doing today?
I'm doing terrific, Bryan. Thank you. How are you?
Thanks for making time. It was great to see you in San Diego a number of weeks back and to spend some time. I think that, as I mentioned in the intro, which is particularly interesting to me, just that you're working with what is now arguably the largest health club chain in the world, but that you come from a diverse background inside and outside of the fitness space. So I'm really interested to talk with you about overall trends in the industry in general. Before we get into that, though, Craig, can you tell us, how did you make your way to Planet? You've been there now, almost 2 years, right?
A little over a year and a half now. And it was a surprise, pleasant surprise. But I was doing some research and consulting work and came across someone that both knew me and some folks here at Planet. They thought it would be kind of a good match to talk to them. When I met with Chris Rondo and Dorvin and the executive team, and they kind of walked me through the kind of the history of Planet, the leadership position and role that they play in the industry, and the vision. Really, I was hooked. I was really kind of excited, for a couple of reasons. Not only to be part of a, brand that's just has phenomenal history, deep passion, strong franchise base, but the ability to really take the company to a next level with digital, well beyond just kind of the traditional transactional base, the ability to truly engage and directly with the consumer as part of the service. So I was, after talking with Chris a few times, I wanted to be part of the story.
Yeah, that's a great story. And as many of the listeners might know, and we were chatting about earlier, the stock has just been on a tear. I know you can't comment on it. It's public business, but I think it's appreciated almost 90% in the last year. And your growth story is just amazing. I mean, you guys will probably, in the next 12 months, you'll cross the 2,000 unit threshold. And then you've got, probably over 12 million members now. It's quite a brand.
It really is. Our growth is the trajectory that we're on the last couple of years and into this year. We've been building more than 200 stores a year. And Chris likes to talk about, our marketing machine, in terms of acquisition. And so our member base is over 13 million now, and and growing. And part of this kind of viral growth, so to speak, is really attributed to some of the very fundamentals that the brand really was formed. As you know, there's 20, maybe a little bit more, 20% of the population that belong to some sort of gym, and more of the fitness enthusiast, and really Planet's part of the Planet's formula has been going after the other 80%. And so we have a very broad consumer base that we appeal to. And that coupled with the very kind of simple, simple environment, very, kind of very high end in terms of experience, but operationally very, very easy to run. The unit economics are really, really strong, which really attracts some of the best operators in the industry. So the combination of those two things have really fueled the growth. And it's really challenging and difficult to really find that kind of value. As you know, we have two tiers, a $10 and a $21.99, well under anybody else who provide the kind of value. So in many cases, not only are we primary, but for a lot of the new types of fitness concepts, we're cost at such an attractive level that sometimes we're secondary. And so we just have a great appeal, great broad base to a very, kind of large percentage of the population. And that really helps to drive our growth.
Yeah. And because you've worked in other consumer industries, right? Your background, we talked about it with Sonic, and then the movie business, you were in banking, you have a pretty varied background with a real focus on digital. And I know you've written about that a bit. Tell us, now that you're in this space with, arguably the biggest, most successful chain in the world, talk a little bit about what you see in the industry in general and what some of your learnings from your prior experiences outside of the industry. What are you seeing out there? What is your view of the industry space when it comes to digital?
Our fitness industry,
yes.
Yeah. So there really isn't much that's revolutionary. Most of as you pointed out, I've really worked in most other industries across my career, particularly for about a 10-year period as a consultant. Had an opportunity to go in and out of a lot of industries. And what I found is that probably 70-75% of a digital strategy is really very consistent. It isn't until kind of the go-to-market or the consumer-facing aspect of your business where it begins to change. But even to that, even the consumer-facing side of your digital strategy, again, very similar. So there isn't much that I'm doing here for Planet, or what I see across our industry that really has not been leveraged or implemented at some level in other industries. As you know, the fitness industry is a bit of a lagger in terms of engaging and leveraging technology. And so many of the things that I've implemented in retail, in finance and banking, in pharmaceuticals, and in manufacturing, I'm just reapplying here in a way that just makes sense for our industry. The trends that I'm seeing is that over the last several years is that there are varying types of kind of digital offerings and implementations that are being done across the industry. So if we look at our consumer base, consumers in general are shifting to engaging with all their brands, and that certainly includes their fitness, health, and wellness. And so there's a consumer shift that's happening, and what I find is that typically will lead the transition of an industry. And so our consumers are rapidly shifting to leveraging more and more kind of digital capabilities and tools. Secondly, if you look across our supply chain, and everything from equipment vendors to apps to even garments, anything in terms of health and wellness and fitness, you have a lot across the supply chain, a lot of suppliers that are moving and offering more digital products and services. And so as we sit kind of in the middle, we're seeing all of these digital innovations happening around us. Then you see the shift occurring across the consumer base, but it's still in its very early stages, not unlike any other industry. And so I would say it's kind of storming around us. And so what I see is that if we begin to leverage and start with the customer and the member in mind, and we begin to implement kind of experiences that drive engagement. So we have 5 objectives here that we leverage. One is we want to leverage the digital in our strategy to broaden reach to more prospects. Secondly is we want to streamline conversion into membership. Thirdly, and probably one of the most important things, is we want to leverage as a member, how do we enhance experiences? How do we leverage digital drive motivation to drive retention and rate? In our case, we've got 2 tiers. And then fourth, and also important, is how do we leverage digital to integrate with other partnerships that will drive more value into the membership. And so, and those are the trends that I'm seeing across the board. Everyone's, chasing mobile. Everyone's kind of, looking and chasing integrated equipment in various ways. There are thousands of apps out there. And so very early stages. And I think that as we look at our members and our members kind of evolve and expect those kind of experiences, that's what will ultimately drive the pace of the trend.
Yes, I agree. Consumers ultimately are going to drive that, and you're right. And so do you see it, obviously, and we chatted a little bit about this in San Diego, is the data component to all this. Can you opine a little bit about that and how that's going to be contributing or the thinking there with respect to all these different data points, and how brands are going to have to deal with using that in a way to do some of the things you're talking about?
Yeah, certainly. The foundation of all digital strategies start with data. Data fuels everything through your digital strategy. It powers your digital strategy. And one of the trends that's accelerating the kind of digital engagement within our industry is that we're seeing kind of more and more data flow from these products and services. It could be mobile apps. It could be your website. It could be the equipment now that all vendors are implementing integrated or digital equipment. And so data, is really the key. That becomes almost becomes certainly in our case a bit of a competitive weapon. The important thing is, and the trend that's happening, which is pretty typical in the early stages, is that everyone is kind of approaching and evolving their different channels, whether it be web or mobile or in club. They're approaching them somewhat independently. And so the important thing, as everybody really knows, who builds out these digital strategies, is the integration of the data across the channels, and the continuity of experiences for your member, both in club and out of club, is really going to be important. And so the basis of fueling, any digital strategy really is going to start with the data. And so our strategy and our initiatives are largely, based on how we build out kind of an integrated platform, so to speak, that will really kind of tie the data across various channels where we engage with our members: web, mobile, in club, eventually wearables that become integrated, as well as we look to want to extend beyond the 4 walls and stay connected with our members within their home. And so data becomes kind of, the foundation of the strategy, and ultimately the fuel that will drive the experiences across the various ways we may engage with them.
That's right. And one of the advantages, obviously, that you have is doing this and then creating an enterprise platform. When you have a brand that has your kind of scale, that becomes much more achievable. Where, with other brands or competitors that don't quite have the scale, it's a lot more challenging. So I'm sure that's where, when you have this wind behind your back and you're doing so well, you're going to be able to do some things that a lot of other people are going to find hard to do, I would say, at this point.
Well, I certainly think that's right, and one of our competitive advantages is our size and scale. Yep. So, as you know, there are quite a few in the kind of high value, low price space that tend to try to replicate what we're doing. No one's really doing it quite as effectively as we are. But the other the other advantage is that our size and scale becomes almost the horsepower in our engine, and so we continue to leverage the size and scale. As an extension of that, the amount of data that comes from that, gives us an advantage in terms of understanding kind of our members, and then how we turn that back around to drive the kind of experiences that will, again, drive the engagement, drive the motivation that not only will incent them to join, become part of the family and a member, but also it's certainly a way in which we will continue to retain them longer.
Craig, do you see the trend for at home and other means of consuming fitness services through other channels? Do you see that growing the overall market, or what do you see that as being in the equation in your view?
Well, what's happening is that there are kind of all these siloed offerings. So you have thousands of apps out there that are offering subscriptions. You have various types of traditional clubs like ours, the higher end, the boutiques are popping up, and then you've got these wearables, right? So you got all these wearables, and then all the equipment vendors are building connected equipment. And the challenge for consumers is that they're really not integrated. They're not connected to provide a cohesive experience. Well, the other silo that's evolving is connected types of touch points, whether it be equipment in the home, and so there's a number of companies that are just evolving for companies like the Mirror, Tonal. There's several companies that I've looked at in Europe, which are building consumer-based equipment, and quite frankly, even our equipment vendors who have who go beyond their commercial line and have a consumer line, they're providing these connected equipment in the home. And so you see that evolving, but the frustration that I see, and as we research with consumers, is that they don't want to have 10 different subscriptions and all of these kind of fitness experiences that aren't connected. And so I think the way we're trying to look at it is, how do we try to become the conduit to kind of connect those kind of experience, connect the mobile with the in-club, with the wearables, so that you don't have all this fragmentation that's kind of evolving, which again it isn't unusual given kind of the early stages, but everyone's trying to approach it from these different vantage points, and that's just creating, like I said, some frustration for consumers. And what's happening is you have a lot of consumers kind of trying things and hopping to different kinds of experiences. So our approach is, again, given our size and scale, how do we not try to turn ourselves into something we're not, but how do we extend that kind of no judgment, self, whatever you define, whatever experience you want, but how do we become kind of the connective tissue that ties not only in club but at home, outside the four walls, and even with some of the wearables that they may have? How do we tie that to kind of a cohesive experience? And so we have no doubt, and we've talked to a lot of outside companies and researchers, obviously investment companies who track our industry, and they all support the notion that the companies that are able to kind of tie that together, create a seamless, frictionless experience for the consumer, so they don't have to kind of buy into 3, 4, 5 different types of subscriptions. Those are the companies that are going to win.
Yeah, I agree. And certainly when you have a platform like Planet, your ability to do those kind of things it's still challenging, but becomes much more a reality when you have almost 13 million people already as customers.
It is the one thing that I want to reiterate, and this is where many companies and a lot of industries I think go wrong, is when they try to become something they're not. Yeah. And so while there are many things that are popping up, the one thing that is we stay true to with Planet, no matter what our digital strategy evolves to, is that it'll remain anchored in the fundamental kind of values and experiences that started the company, but just kind of naturally extend it.
Yes, that's an important distinction, right? Because people can lose their way, right?
Yes.
Yeah, they can try to do too much, or they get away from their foundation, and then they get lost, and you kind of that can be dangerous, right?
Yeah, it really, and this is what I've learned from other industries, and I've seen it here. I've seen a lot of other fitness companies kind of chase things. I've seen them come out with apps, or come out with other types of equipment or offerings, and it just doesn't. It's not a natural extension. It doesn't feel like the brand. And so while it may be following a cool, and sexy trend, consumers are pretty smart, and they won't engage if it feels like, you don't have kind of you're based on whatever fundamental, culture and an experience that your brand stands for. So that is a tenet that, regardless of any of the innovation and any of the technology, we are anchoring it in what made Planet, the leader it is today. Very unique experience, very kind of, no judgment, and really whatever experience you kind of want. We're just going to leverage digital and innovation to just extend that very core.
Yeah, it makes total sense, Greg. So I know you gave us a half an hour, so we're about to wrap up, but I was going to ask you, how did you enjoy your experience in San Diego at IHRSA? Did you find it interesting?
Oh, absolutely. I always find it fascinating. First of all, the energy there is just amazing. And then, I love to kind of engage with a lot of the companies that, and the innovations that they're coming out with, so very exciting. The other thing, quite frankly, is it's an opportunity. I probably spend, half the time at the show, and the other half of the time really engaging and meeting with partners, both future and prospective partners. And so it's this was my second IHRSA. I went to the first one. I was only in a couple of months. Now that I've been in the industry for more than a year, I actually had more of an understanding kind of going into it. So enjoyed San Diego quite a bit.
It was great seeing you there, and we really appreciate you, by the way, joining the Fitness Industry Technology Council. And I know we're going to be talking further about your leadership in that. And it's just with a guy with your kind of experience working at the most significant brand on the planet. Today, it's just great to hear, your perspective on digital and to kind of get your flavor of it. I know the audience will really appreciate it, hearing directly from a leader like you on the subject. So just want to extend our gratitude and thanks for your making time out of your busy schedule to visit today.
Yeah, thanks, Bryan. My pleasure.
Hello, listeners. This is Bryan O'Rourke, and thanks so much for listening to the Fitness Plus Technology Podcast. The podcast is made possible by the Fitness Industry Technology Council, a consortium of global brands working together to enhance the adoption of technologies in the fitness space. Our company, Videri Ventures, which is invested in Vertimax, Montezuma, Gold's Gym, Houston, Texas, and Fitness 24/7 Thailand, also underwrites the podcast along with our service companies, Integris Advisors, Moon Mission Media, and others. Please feel free to share this podcast with your colleagues. And if I can be of any assistance to you, don't hesitate to reach out, bryanko'rourke@gmail.com, or find me on any of the major social networks. Have a great day, and thanks for listening.